When James K. Polk ran for president, he campaigned on an openly expansionist platform. He promised to acquire both Texas and Oregon, and within his first year in office, he delivered on both goals. Polk then turned his attention to California. He subscribed to the belief that the United States was destined to stretch from the Atlantic to the Pacific Ocean, an idea known as manifest destiny. His predecessor, John Tyler, had worked to increase trade between the United States and Asian nations, making a Pacific port strategically and economically important. The problem was that Mexico controlled the territory between Texas and California. Polk chose to pursue this goal through both diplomacy and aggression. His diplomatic strategy involved sending a representative, John Slidell, to Mexico to offer $25 million for the territory between Texas and California. However, this effort was undermined by political instability in Mexico. The country was in the midst of a civil war between Centralists and Federalists, and while the American representative was in Mexico City, the presidency changed hands several times. Ultimately, the Mexican government rejected the offer, both because it did not want to surrender such a large portion of its territory and because its leadership was unstable. With diplomacy having failed, Polk turned to aggressive action. He ordered General Zachary Taylor to move U.S. troops to the Nueces River, which Mexico considered its border with Texas. The United States, however, claimed the Rio Grande as the official border. When Mexico rejected Polk's offer, Taylor was ordered to enter the disputed territory between the two rivers. He established Fort Texas along the Rio Grande. From the Mexican perspective, it was an invasion and occupation of its sovereign land. On May 3rd, Mexican forces besieged the fort. One of its officers, Major Jacob Brown, would be struck in the leg by a cannonball. He eventually succumbed to his wounds and was one of the 2 Americans that died in the attack. Afterwards, the fort became known as Fort Brown. When news of the clash reached Washington, D.C., Polk requested a declaration of war from Congress, which was approved on May 13, 1846. Texas became the primary staging ground for the American invasion of Mexico. Taylor marched his forces south, capturing Matamoros, moving on to Saltillo, and taking the city of Monterrey along the way. Since the invasion occurred while Mexico was still divided by civil war, it was difficult for the Mexican government to coordinate an effective defense. The one figure capable of uniting the country against the United States was Antonio López de Santa Anna, who was living in exile in Cuba. The United States reached an agreement allowing Santa Anna to return to Mexico in exchange for negotiating a land deal. Instead, Santa Anna returned home, organized an army of roughly 12,000 men, and attacked American forces at the Battle of Buena Vista. The battle was brutal and costly for both sides, but the Mexican army ultimately withdrew, allowing the United States to claim victory. Meanwhile, a second American force of approximately 12,000 troops under General Winfield Scott launched an amphibious invasion at Veracruz. This was the largest seaborne invasion in American history until the D-Day landings in 1944. Veracruz lay due east of Mexico City, and Scott planned to march directly toward the capital. However, the campaign faced serious challenges. Veracruz was plagued by disease, and nearly a third of Scott's army fell ill with yellow fever and malaria. Additionally, Santa Anna, who was from Veracruz, knew the surrounding terrain well and attempted to ambush the American army at a narrow pass that would have forced U.S. troops to march nearly single file. Scott learned of Santa Anna's trap near Veracruz through a combination of engineer reconnaissance, contact with Mexican advance positions, and his own strategic understanding of terrain and disease. After the fall of Veracruz, Scott recognized that Santa Anna would block the national road inland and attempt to delay the Americans in the unhealthy coastal lowlands. Reports from Army engineers, which included Robert E. Lee, confirmed that Santa Anna had fortified the Cerro Gordo Pass for precisely this purpose. Scott avoided the trap by using reconnaissance to find a flanking route, defeating Santa Anna before disease could cripple his army. Scott then continued his advance on Mexico City. On September 15, 1847, American forces captured the Mexican capital, effectively ending the war. The two nations later negotiated the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo, which formally ended the conflict. Under the treaty, Mexico ceded all territory between Texas and California to the United States in exchange for $15 million. Mexican residents in the ceded lands were given the choice of becoming U.S. citizens or receiving assistance to relocate to Mexico. Finally, the Mexican government officially recognized the Rio Grande as its northern border, relinquishing any remaining claims to Texas.